So one of the most common topics right now going on in the gaming industry is Cyberpunk versus Starfield. Everyone's talking about that. Everyone's posting like these little videos of them side by side, and I'm going to do the same thing. The background video will be a side by side of both Cyberpunk and Starfield, and this audio is just mostly just gonna be something that plays over it. Just talk about both games, comparing them, but also more so kind of it's assisting Starfield more so than hurting it. I don't want people to see this as like me furthering the bashing of Starfield, because it's not the intention here. It's just more of a reality, and also, kind of steaming another issue that I mentioned a long time ago, which a long time ago, when they first showed the trailer for, or the teaser for Elder Scrolls 6, I made a very strong comment on Twitch, which was, if this game has the creation engine, it's gonna freaking suck. And that's kind of the issue that Starfield has. The same issue that Fallout 4 had, the same issue that Fallout 76 had. The creation engine. The creation engine is the engine that Bethesda uses for their flagship titles, aka Fallout and Elder Scrolls. The creation engine is incredibly outdated, and because of that, all of their games that run on that engine is they come off as outdated. When you play Starfield, it does feel like a game that's too old for the modern times. You compare it to Cyberpunk, it looks older, like an older game, even though Cyberpunk is the older game. You play Fallout 4, you play Fallout 76, they all look, feel, and perform like older games, even though they're not necessarily that old in relative of their release. The issue is the engine. The engine that they use is outdated. You compare that to Cyberpunk, which uses the CD Projekt Red's Red engine at first, and now it's switched to Unreal 5. The Red engine, is an engine that gets updated a lot, and they put a lot of time and effort into it. And Unreal Engine 5 is basically, the gold standard of an engine right now until Unreal Engine 6 becomes a thing. So you're comparing a game on Unreal Engine 5 to a game that runs on the creation engine, you're going to see, big leaps in technology. You're going to see different, lighting, different things with ray tracing, different things when it comes to, the environment and character models. In a way, it is kind of unfair to compare the two games. Essentially, they are part of the same genre. They're both open world RPGs that can be first person. Starfield, you can turn it into third person if you want to. It's a Bethesda game. Bethesda games that come to Fallout and Elder Scrolls tend to have a button you press that lets you choose if you want to be first person or third person. A lot of people wish Cyberpunk was in third person, but it never became a thing. So when you look at them side by side, yeah, Starfield looks outdated, and it's probably because of the engine. But just because the engines are so different, that doesn't mean that there aren't key component game design things that one does better than the other, and you can't compare those things. Both games are shooters, regardless of the fact that they're both open world RPGs. They're both shooters. Starfield's gunplay is kind of lame. But at the same time, Cyberpunk's gunplay isn't all that great either. The issue there is you have two developers who aren't necessarily FPS game developers. Cyberpunk is made by CD Projekt Red, and who's primarily known for making games like The Witcher, these medieval dark fantasy RPGs. Bethesda, more known for Elder Scrolls. Again, you're thinking dark fantasy, medieval style RPGs. So these games that are primarily used for like hacking and slashing, using bows and magical spells and things like that, are being developed into FPS games that aren't necessarily like built for by the developers themselves to be traditional FPS experiences. Yes, Fallout has always been a shooter, but even Fallout has always had very clunky and not great gunplay, which is why VATS exists to kind of overcorrect the in-game terrible gun design that Fallout has. And they haven't really evolved since Fallout to have a better gunplay system. But see, Cyberpunk, it does a better job with its gunplay than Starfield does. You actually do have a pretty not great but decent cover system as in Cyberpunk, where V can look over objects or can peek out of cover, and cover kind of doesn't really exist in Starfield. It does a little bit, but it's like super clunky, and it's kind of like it's almost like it's RNG on whether or not your character will or won't peek over something or do anything cover related. There's also the fact that when it comes to damage, I play both games on very hard, but even on Cyberpunk, when I'm playing on very hard, I'm still doing a very good damage to enemies. Whereas in Starfield, it seems like things are still just bullet spongy as hell. And when it comes to bullet sponge enemies, and you're playing a shooter, if it's different. When you're playing on like a game with swords and bows, things like that. You understand. It's something about it. I don't know exactly what it is, but something about the feel of those games. You kind of just accept enemies being tankier. But you play a shooter, you kind of like break the immersion when it takes a long time for the enemy to dodge the guns. It's like, all right, this is getting a little old, and it makes the gameplay look ugly as well. So you watch like gameplay of Cyberpunk and of Starfield, and you see like how long it takes to kill an enemy. You're like, all right, this kind of looks ridiculous. Like this guy that's unloaded like freaking 3 mags of a shotgun into this dude in Starfield, and he's still at half health. It gets a little silly. So then you have like world design. People will compare the world design of the two games, and the goal of both those games are vastly different. Cyberpunk takes place pretty much in one location, Night City. Yes, Dogtown exists, but Dogtown is pretty much a minor town on the south of Night City. You could call it a city within a city when it comes to just how small and close Dogtown is to Night City. Whereas with Starfield, there isn't just one city. You're not spending your entire time in New Atlantis. You're not spending your entire time in what's that the Cyberpunk knockoff city. It was the Nova. I forgot what it was called. It's been a while since I played Starfield. But you're going to like multiple like major cities within the game, and then you also have like all the extra planets. When you have like more and more assets in the game, you start to stretch that game out more and more when it comes to how much detail it can have without you basically having to like invest even more money and more resources into even to have this game be more expensive than it actually is. Again, that does kind of sound like a cop out or an excuse for Starfield, but it's not really meant to be. It's just this is just how the game design, and it's hard to compare these two games when it comes to the design when one game is a more constrained or more I don't want to say linear, but like a smaller build of a video game. Cyberpunk costs CD Projekt Red a lot of money, but when being compared to scope is smaller. It's like comparing, say, a roguelike to Skyrim. Like, yeah, the roguelike is going to be small. They're designed to be small. You're not going to like all these locations, and that could be like a bad comparison. But I'm more so just thinking of like find a game that has a very large scope and large ambition in a game that's small and not really still trying to have a lot of scope and ambition. Cyberpunk does have a lot of ambition. It's just not a large game. Like I said, you're in primarily one city, excluding the expansion, which gives you like a second minor city that's just a few minutes of a drive from the main city. So I also want to like just jump in here and talk about some of the characters, because I feel like when it's about these kind of games, these kind of RPGs that have companions and a lot of dialogue, you want to talk about characters. And the issue between Starfield and Cyberpunk is Cyberpunk has very memorable characters, even though the game doesn't have any actual companions, which is kind of sad. We compare it to a game that does have companions, because companions should be the most memorable characters in a video game. You look at Mass Effect, any Mass Effect game, the most memorable characters in those games are always your companions. Liara, Garrus, Rex, Tali, Ashley, Caden, Morton Solus, and so on and so on and so on. Dragon Age, the same thing when it comes to Alistair, Morgan, and Shell. You think about Dragon Age 2 with Adeline, Isabella, and Varric. You think about Baldur's Gate 3. You have Asterion and Shadowheart and Lae'zel and Gale. So like you name any RPG that has companions in it, and the companions are very memorable, and you'll know their names off the top of your head. Starfield's companions are pretty much non-existent. Like, they exist in the sense of that they're there and you talk to them, but they're not memorable. You're not going to remember any of these companions. You won't remember Sam at all. He's probably the most boring character when it comes to the companions. Sarah Morgan has kind of become like a meme because like she's like a goody two shoes, so people kind of like meme her out as someone who dislikes everything you do whenever you're trying to have like a more pirate like playthrough. these characters are kind of just, they're boards of dialogue, and this is kind of like an issue with Bethesda in general. Bethesda has never been good at making real companions. Like, you think about your companions in Skyrim, they're just your pack mules, and that's kind of the joke when it comes to Elder Scrolls characters, is that they're anyone who becomes like your companion, who you travel with the game with, becomes your pack mule. Lydia is just someone who is around, who holds your shit. Even when it came to being in House Serana as your companion, you know, she just became someone who just carries your stuff. And in Starfield, that's the same thing. They don't really matter. They're just there to carry your extra junk. They're boring. All the companions in Bethesda games are boring. And so you compare it to a game like Cyberpunk, doesn't even have companions, but all the other characters who V interacts with, your love interests like Panam and Judy and River and so on. Like, they're all very well established characters who are very great characters on their own, and that stands out more than any character in Starfield in general. If you have like V's friends, like they're not companions, but they're just her friends. You have like Victor. You had Jackie before he inevitably dies off. You have Delamain. There's all these characters who V come across as, and they're just good characters. And if you want to say, okay, well, what about Johnny? Johnny should count as a companion to V. Is not V's choice to have Johnny as a companion, but Johnny Silverhand as a character is better than any character in Starfield. Even when it comes to the new expansion with Phantom Liberty, Somi, also known as Songbird, is a better character than any character in Starfield. Idris Elba's character, Reed, is a better character than anyone in Starfield. So like, when you compare these two games, in almost every way possible, Cyberpunk kind of just excels compared to Starfield. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, as much as I hate these comparison videos personally, and I do want to point out how unfair it is because of like how outdated the engine is for Starfield. It's easy to see and easy to jump onto this bandwagon of why Cyberpunk is a better game for you to play in 2023 than Starfield, when you see how much more effort is put into the companions, from CD Projekt Red versus Bethesda and Starfield. There's not a lot of effort or care to make these companions human and have personality. Personality is what a lot of characters lack in video games, and we tend, as RPG players, we tend to lean towards games that have personality for the side characters. And then you have the story and dialogue. You'll see people compare those two when it comes to the voice acting sounds a little bit better in Cyberpunk. The story's more engaging, more interesting. There's an actual plot, whereas Starfield kind of doesn't like it even has a plot. And that's kind of like the issue when it comes with Bethesda in general. Like, Bethesda games are more so about you make your character, they tell you here's the main missions, but then you just go fuck off and do whatever you want to do. That's kind of what Bethesda games are. Yeah, here's the main mission. Go talk to the Yarlow freaking White Run, and you're like, sure, I'll do that in 100 hours. You're playing Fallout New Vegas, and it's like, hey, we need you to go freaking, to this city so you can figure out what happened with the guy with the freaking checkered jacket. And it's like, yeah, I'll do that in 50 hours. So like, that's kind of what Bethesda games are. It's like, you have a direction for the game which you to go into, but the player who plays these games kind of just fucks off and go do whatever. Like, you just go you go do whatever mission you want to do. You go do side quests and explore dungeons, things like that. And that's not Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk does have like side content, like dealing with the psychos and doing gigs and, helping out the cops and, going to find these tarot cards and buying cars. Like, there's Cyberpunk, it has like all that kind of stuff. But most people would still, play along the lines of the main story until they get to a point where it's like, okay, let's go do other stuff because I don't want to advance the story too much right now. So it's more linear than a Bethesda game would be when it comes to how people play it. People approach the Bethesda games has always been, I don't care about the main story. I'm here to go do other stuff. I enjoy other stuff. Like, so if you see content creators who are big Bethesda people, they love games like Starfield because it's just more of what they're used to. There's a streamer who I've not watched a lot of, but I'll go to stream here and there, and they thoroughly enjoy the hell out of Starfield, even though I'm so fun to be pretty mediocre. And I see other people who just don't enjoy it at all. But they enjoy it. They love Bethesda games. They still play Skyrim to this day. They have insane amount of hours in Skyrim. They're playing it constantly. And it's like, because that's what they like, and Starfield is just more of the same of what they're into. So when it comes to like these two games being compared, it is a fair comparison because they are part of the same genre. They're both open world RPGs. They're both futuristic. So it's not even like you're comparing two games that are like not set in a similar time period, but they're both futuristic video games. One is more I don't want to say realistic than the other. I feel like that can also be like interpreted in a different way. You could say both are realistic in the sense of humanity could be at that point at some point in the future. Who knows? In Cyberpunk being as dystopian as it is, I think people are more drawn to it. I think people are way more drawn to the aesthetics of Cyberpunk than they are to Starfield. Starfield's aesthetics just has that same, outdated Bethesda like aesthetic to it. So it's like, Bethesda really they hit out apart with Skyrim, and I think most people are trying to like hope that every game since Skyrim is a copy of that game. And Bethesda themselves hasn't really developed a game since that really like pushes that threshold. Every game that Bethesda has launched since Skyrim has been mediocre. I think Fallout 4 is a bad game. The story sucks. It's just terrible. It's Fallout 76. We saw what happened with that. And then here we are on Starfield. People will mention like, what about this game? Well, the other Bethesda games that I'm not mentioning aren't developed by the same people who do the Fallout games, the Elder Scrolls games, for example. Arcane Studios does Dishonored, so Bethesda doesn't get a thumbs up for Dishonored when that's Arcane Studios who works for Bethesda, but they're the ones who make that game. id Software, they're the ones who make Doom, so they get the credit for Doom, not Todd Howard. And the same thing goes when it comes to like Deathloop. You don't give Todd Howard credit for Deathloop or even ESO, which ESO is done by ZeniMax, more so than it is Bethesda, who does Skyrim and Oblivion and Morrowind. They're not really the same people. And even other people are better at making Bethesda games than Bethesda. When you think about like New Vegas is probably the best Fallout game, but it's made by Obsidian, who aren't a Bethesda company. They just worked with Bethesda on that game, and it was a better Fallout game. CD Projekt Red, on the other hand, the people who made Cyberpunk are the same people who made Witcher. So it's like, they know how to work with a little bit more, and they're just an advancement. You have that technology leap when it comes to video games. CD Projekt Red understands that leap and knows how to take advantage of it, whereas Bethesda doesn't really care. They're just going to design their games the way they design their games, use their outdated engine, and then here you go. So this is it's not even a long video, but it's a long way to say it's not really fair to compare the two games in this way, because they're both, everyone who's going to play these games are going to like them or dislike them regardless of anything. If Fallout and Skyrim are games that interest you, you're probably going to be interested in Starfield. If CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk game, if you into this Cyberpunk like stuff, you watch Edge Runners or whatever, you're going to be interested in it. Like, that's just how it is. People are going to like things, people are going to dislike things. Is there ways where technology wise Bethesda just seems like they just didn't make a modern video game? Sure, but again, that goes back to the engine. At what point do you just be like, okay, maybe it's better if we start making our games on Unreal Engine 5, or make a brand new engine instead of just using Creation Engine again and again and again. And this is kind of also the same issue when it comes to like Call of Duty. Call of Duty also runs on pretty much the exact same engine that they just keep updating over and over again. And it's like, all right, you kind of like got to move on from that at some point. Either you make a whole new engine, or you just become part of the masses and just use Unreal Engine 5, or use the Cry engine. Those are options. If you're EA, that's something you can consider. Like, do you use Cry engine or do you use Frostbite? Frostbite shouldn't be used on everything. It's a whole thing when it comes. That's a whole video in itself when it comes to like talking about video game engines and which ones people should use or people should like leave into the past. And at this point, Creation Engine is an engine that should probably be left into the past. Which game is the better game visually to look at? Which one's more fun to watch when it comes to someone being doing a stream? Probably Cyberpunk, because it looks more modern. You're saying that the entire video has been a side by side of these two games, and you're probably going to end this video with the thought process like, yeah, Cyberpunk is definitely a better game, looks better, I'd rather play that. But also, you might still find Starfield of some kind of interest to some kind of degree, even though it looks like a way more slow paced, way more chill and laid back game, and not as demanding as Cyberpunk. I don't know. That's up to you to decide, but that's it for this video. I just want to like have this conversation. I'll see you guys on the next one. Y'all have a good rest of y'all day. Y'all stay safe, be kind to one another, be well both mentally and physically. Be boy Nubis Money here. Deuces.